Let's bring in ABC News contributor LZ Granderson. LZ, thanks so much for joining us. Been asking everybody the same question tonight. First, let me just get your reaction to the verdict.
You know, it's muted. It's muted because there was a video that literally had the murder caught on tape, on camera. And so it was very difficult to deny that 10-minute moment with George Floyd and former Officer Chauvin. But the reason why it's muted is because I'm also reminded of what the police department said that day, soon thereafter. What they said was George Floyd experienced a medical incident and that he died. When you go back and you read that initial statement, which is about 200 words, there is no mention of the witnesses who were asking Mr. Chauvin to remove his knee from Mr. Floyd's neck. There's no mention that Mr. Chauvin's knee was even on Mr. Floyd's neck. So my reaction is muted because I know how lucky we are to get here. We're lucky that that 17-year-old girl's phone had enough charge to capture that moment. We're lucky she went to the store that day. We're lucky she went to that store at that moment. What if she had decided to go earlier? We may not have had any of this. So it's muted because I have relief that there is a guilty charge, a guilty verdict, but I also remember what could have happened had that video not been captured.
And today you penned an op-ed in the LA Times where you said, quote, a guilty verdict in the Chauvin trial won't be enough for real progress. What does real progress look like to you?
Real progress is when we have an officer on trial without a video going viral, without protesters. Real progress is when the police is actually able to make sure that the bad officers get off of the force, get off of our streets before they get to a point in which they encounter a George Floyd. So real progress is actually the good police officers intervening to save George Floyd's life. When we get to that point in terms of law enforcement and the way we talk about criminal justice, then we'll see real progress, in my opinion.
And you also touch upon the important role cell phone videos have played in providing us a view into interactions with police. But despite all of that, you say this case energized a movement for police reform and justice that could no longer be silenced. But we did not arrive here by design. If anything, the design was to avoid this moment. How does this country go about having significant systemic change?
Well, first it starts with us on an interpersonal level. You know, many families will be discussing this case, will be discussing this trial and the events of it. I will add that this incident, that this day of May 2020 is still happening in the sense that we have other officers that need to also go through their court hearings and court proceedings in a trial. We also have to understand, you know, how exactly did that press release get out in the first place, considering the number of witnesses that were there who saw Derek Chauvin put his knee on George Floyd's neck, and yet there's no mention of any of that in the initial report or initial statement. So it first begins with an interpersonal sort of looking at what happened and how you feel about it. And then I would encourage people who are still confused, who are still upset, or worse yet, who think we can now move on. I would encourage you to do things to educate yourself. Read the new Jim Crow. Watch the 13th. Go out of your comfort zone to learn more about this, because it is imperative that you educate yourself so that when things like this occur again, you're not blindsided by the dynamics. You actually have information and have more experience in understanding what to look out for. So it begins at home. It begins with us interpersonally.
I know that you say your reaction is muted to the verdict. I'm curious if you feel hopeful at all about the potential for change in this moment.
Well, the one thing that I'm holding on to, even though I recognize that because of the video they had really no choice, seeing the good officers be willing to call out the actions of a bad officer. My hope, really my prayer, is that this becomes a trend, that this catches on, because then we can start talking about establishing trust between law enforcement and the communities in which they serve. But right now, as long as we still think it's us versus them, and again, when you look at that initial statement made by the police department, it feels very much like that. As long as it feels that way, it's difficult to establish trust. So my hope is that the parade of officers who are willing to come forward and say that is not proper police conduct, they keep that energy, and that it catches fire, and that other police departments also have those moments. Because no one, not good cops, not citizens, no one wants to deal with this again. But the only way we can start to avoid it is by getting those Derek Chauvins out of the police departments.
LZ Granderson, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.